Hey there everyone, how's it going? Coming to y'all with another knife review. I know I've been slow rolling the reviews. Life got a bit busy, and I do apologize for that. But I wanted to go ahead and knock out a review on this Kershaw Emerson CQC 5K, or as it's known by its Kershaw model number. Let's see if I can get that to show up there. 6070 BLK. This is a much smaller Kershaw than the last Kershaw Emerson that I reviewed. The last one was meant as a larger self-defense, quote-unquote tactical knife. And this one is definitely designed more for the everyday carry role. There's a lot of positive I have to say about it. There's a lot of negative I have to say about it. If you don't have time to watch the whole review, my overall opinion is it is a decent knife, but certainly not for everybody due to certain thickness and weight issues, as well as a less than favorable blade grind. So if you don't have time to watch the entire video and you only have 30 or 35 bucks to spend on an all-purpose everyday carry knife, and you want something lighter weight or something that slices beautifully, you may want to pass this up in favor of something a little bit more ideal for the task. Something like a Bird Metalarkin G10 I think would be better for an everyday carry knife if you only are going to buy one knife to carry and use every day. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the review. I'd show you the packaging if I had it, but I did not buy this knife brand new. I bought it in used condition, but it was fairly new whenever I got it. Like, it hadn't been used much. The seller just threw away the box like many of them do. From what I know, it's just a typical Kershaw knife box. Maybe it says Kershaw Emerson on it. I don't know. Don't care all that much. I doubt you guys even care about it anyways. Let's jump into the blade itself. It is 3 inches long and made from Kershaw's HCR 14 MOV. Now, interestingly, this did not perform as well as the other Kershaw Emerson that I reviewed in terms of edge retention. I don't know if it's because that one was a really good heat treat, like it just came from a really good batch, or this one came from a less than ideal batch, but it's still been a serviceable steel. It still has performed on par with like the CRKT Drifters in HCR 14 and many of the HCR 13s from the Bird line. So while not as amazingly well performing as the last Kershaw I reviewed, for the steel it is still a serviceable blade steel. It sharpens up easily enough. It holds an edge for a reasonable amount of time. It will dull on you, but it's also very easy to sharpen up, and it takes a very, very fine edge. In terms of rust resistance, you guys know how HCR 13 and 14 MOVs are. If you don't, they're adequate. It's about on par with AUS 8. That is to say that it will rust on you if you leave it uncoated and unoiled in high humidity environments. Here in Northeast Texas, it gets damn humid, and I do have to coat my blades in oil when they're being stored or after I've used them. Luckily, the coating on the blade does help prevent rust anywhere but the surface edge, or the cutting edge rather. If I had to guess what the coating is, I would say it's just a fairly durable Teflon. It hasn't peeled off and flaked off in my usage like many black finishes have, but I suspect that if I continue using it heavily over time, it will wear down faster than something like a titanium nitride. And certainly faster than a tungsten DLC coating. The blade shape we have here is, I suppose, what you'd call the clip point. It definitely has been modified, has the kind of buoy swedge, and does have a fair amount of belly. It does slice okay. When I say okay, just know that I mean it doesn't slice as well as a nice high hollow grind or a full flat grind, and that's because you can see we have this kind of abrupt grind here, and if I had to guess, I would say it's a flat grind. I don't feel any detection of hollow grinding. It feels like just a really low flat grind, and with a somewhat thicker, not super thick, but thicker than most in its category blade, it doesn't slice all that well with that combination of factors. That on the coated blade, you definitely have more traction when moving through whatever you're cutting. It isn't the world's best slicer. It's adequate, it gets the job done, but if you're going through a lot of cardboard, you will feel drag with this, I promise you, because I did. Overall, not a huge issue, especially because the average person's used to going to be taking this out to cut their steak and pop a loose string off their shirt. But it is worth noting for anyone who does use their knives very heavily day in and day out. Deployment speed and lockup on the knife is exactly what you'd expect. Comes out nice and fast, and very easily, I might add. Just a little bit of tension on that thumb disc and it pops out nice and quickly, and it locks up tight. There's no play up and down, there's no play side to side, and if you ever got any blade play whatsoever, the Emerson line from Kershaw is wonderfully equipped with flathead screws on the pivot, or flathead screw on the pivot, and Phillips heads on the body, so they're very easy to maintenance. Thank God for that, by the way, because I had lost my torque set at one point, and I had to take this knife apart. And I took it apart for primarily cleaning reasons, but also because I was very annoyed. Whenever I first got it, it was rubbing the liner. And let's see if I can show you the centering on it now. You can see it's still not great, but it's barely off that liner. And that was a huge issue for me because it was just scraping every time I opened and closed it. You can hear now it's fine. So I took it apart and I did everything I could. I tweaked the pivot point quite a bit. I tried even putting a very thin washer on this side of the knife to push the blade tank over to the side more, but that just interfered with deployment. Ultimately, I got it to a point where it wouldn't rub the liner anymore, but it's still very, very far from centered. Not a huge issue, and I know it's more of just an aesthetic thing. A lot of people, knife enthusiasts specifically, love to have their knives perfectly centered. At this price point, it's certainly not a huge issue, but you can find perfectly centered knives in the same price range. So it is worth noting. Mine was not very well centered. And taking it apart and modifying it, I got it to where it was satisfactory, but still, admittedly, far from ideal. So, hardware is nice, deployment speed is nice, lockup is nice. One interesting thing is we have this wave feature here, and I'll see if I don't embarrass myself trying to show you how the wave feature works on camera this time. It's very awkward working around a tripod and trying to pull this toward the edge of this cutout pocket, but basically, you see how it catches right there? Or how it caught on the edge of the pocket. If my fist wasn't covering the blade, it would have been able to pop open. But essentially, this little hook catches the fabric, and it waves the blade open as such. Which makes for an automatic deployment, so to speak, when you pull the knife from your pocket if you pull toward the seam of the pocket itself. So it can be a very fast deploying knife, almost a virtual fixed blade once you're practiced with it. Also worth noting, this extended tang here could be used as a front flipper, although it's not its primary purpose. You can use it as such, with some practice and when you're not working around a freaking tripod. There you go. So if you like front flippers, if you're one of those people, then you can use this as such. I personally dislike the front flipper design quite a lot. I find it to be annoying and more of a gimmick than anything else, but you can do it with this if you want to. It's certainly not ideal, but you have that option. How does it carry in the pocket? Well, let's go ahead and show you, since I have the pocket here. It carries very, very high. Okay, I like a bit of knife exposed from my pocket to grab onto it, but admittedly this is a bit too much even for me. There's a lot of knife exposed here from the pocket. Okay, when you consider the relatively small size of the knife, 4 inches long when closed, we have a pretty significant portion of our knife sticking out of our pocket at all times. Now, I don't mind other people seeing my knives. That's not why I like to have a little bit less exposed, but I do hate when a knife is that far exposed because bumping against surfaces could easily knock the knife out of your pocket. So it's something to be concerned with. It is positionable to the right and left hand sides though, so the knife is fully ambidextrous. And before anybody in the comment section wants to make a comment that it's not truly ambidextrous because it's a liner lock, I would say you're wasting your breath. It is just not true. From everything I've seen and experienced in my life with a left-handed brother, lefties adjust to things in the same way that righties do. For us, right-handers, it's natural to push the liner over and close the knife. To my brother, and I would assume other left-handed people, it is natural to pull the liner in. It's how you've trained your muscles and how you've trained your body to tackle the task, and lefties have done so much the same way righties have, just the opposite direction. So yes, a liner lock or a frame lock is still ambidextrous. So, you know, a fully ambidextrous knife that is nice. About the pocket clip itself, it's pretty typical Kershaw Emerson. You know, we have our skull logo on our tri-mounting position. And because this is very similar to many Benchmade mounting positions, I'm willing to bet you could probably put a Benchmade deep carry clip on this. It still wouldn't, like, bury the entire knife, but I bet you'd get about that much exposed out of your pocket after that. And at that point, it would be a much better pocket clip. That being said, it isn't overly bent up. There's not a huge lip here, which means this doesn't catch on the side of doors and on seat belts and everything else to bend your clip out of proportion or even just snap it off like a lot of knives have, so I do appreciate that aspect of it. Handle, if I haven't mentioned already, is G10, this OD green G10. It's pretty typical Chinese G10, not a ton of traction, but it does give you some grip, and the handle is very ergonomic. Very, very ergonomic, because it's super freaking thick for a knife of this size. And I wish I brought out my other knives to compare it to. I actually don't have my comparisons on hand. They're tucked away in a bookshelf. But it's a very, very thick handle for a knife of this size. But it does lead to a very ergonomic grip, and we do have a nice functional thumb ramp with some very functional jimping. So if jimping's a big deal to you, this is extremely functional stuff. Yeah, it is made in China. You should know that from the blade steel and from the price point. Locking mechanism is a liner lock, and here comes another critique. Not that it's a liner lock, and not that the liner's too thin. The liner's actually pretty thick. And it isn't even that the liners aren't drilled out and skeletonized, though that does result in this being a 3.8 ounce knife with only a 3-inch blade, so that may be an issue to many. But my issue with the liner lock is that we don't have any jimping on the liner. I don't care all that much about jimping on the top spine of the knife or on the thumb ramp. It's cool, but it's not something I care about all that much. It doesn't improve ergonomics all that much. What does improve ergonomics by quite a bit is jimping on the liner for a better grip, because I have slipped off of non-jimped liner locks many, many times. And this one is extremely smooth, so I would prefer to see some jimping cut in on the liners of these Kershaw Emersons. As it sits, it's fine, but I think you could improve it if you did so. I already mentioned that the washers aren't, or the liners are not drilled out. It is solid steel in there, but they are reasonably thick. There's my engagement against the blade tang. 3.8 ounces for a 3-inch blade is heavy for a lot of people. I've actually moved to the point where I don't necessarily care as much as I used to. I still do prefer to carry lighter knives in general, but I don't mind having something a little heavier. The Schrade LB7 is one that I used to carry in my pocket, despite it being meant to be carried on a belt sheath. And the Schrade Surelock that I reviewed very recently has been one of my EDCs of choice for the last few months. And that was like a 6.8 ounce knife. So 3.8, not a huge issue, but for the amount of blade you're getting, you might want to consider it. You can get much larger knives for the same weight and even lighter that are equally durable. This weighs about the same as a Spyderco Tenacious, so take that into consideration. So yeah, everything being said, it comes down to preference, right? Is this knife a good buy? I would say it is a perfectly acceptable choice. I do enjoy it, and I do like carrying it, but there are a number of issues that may turn you away from the knife. The possibly not so great quality control with my very poor centering and rubbing of the liner whenever I first got it could be an indicator of poor quality control. Could also just be from a bad batch, you never know. But that does still speak to quality control if bad batches get out into the market. So there is possibly a concern with quality control. I haven't been too upset with it, but it is worth noting. Fairly thick handle, no jimped liner for a less than ideal disengagement of the locking mechanism, and a very high carrying clip might all result in a knife that you don't personally prefer to carry for the amount of blade you get. And if that's the case, there's tons of options out there. But if you don't mind the heavier weight and the chunkier handle, and you know, you may even prefer it, I know a lot of friends of mine do, this is an outstanding blade for the $30 price tag that it carries. Is it the best knife in its price range? Absolutely not. But I don't think it's the worst either, and I do think it's very, very carryable. So, I hope I haven't missed anything, but that has been my review on the Kershaw Emerson CQC 5K, otherwise known as the 6070 BLK. It is a perfectly acceptable EDC, though possibly not the most amazing option that Kershaw has to offer. So, let me know what you think down in the comment section down below. If you have this knife and you've carried it and you enjoy it, definitely comment your experience. If you dislike it, also comment that. I welcome all discussion, be it positive or negative on a critical level. Negativity for the sake of negativity is always discouraged, but if you have a critique you'd like to put in the comment section down below, it's always welcome. And if you guys have any other questions that I didn't answer here in this video, feel free to go ahead and ask, and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. But, until next time, peace, and take care.